Okay, we're back live after the holiday weekend. How are you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good as well. It was a last weekend was pretty busy, not just with work, but the holidays. I hope you had a good holiday, long weekend. It's always good to get some breaks.
Yeah, for sure. You too. It was fun. It was a little busy, but it's like you said, it's nice to have some time off sometimes.
Yeah, it was. And, but before we get started, we'll do a little recap of last week's episode because it was a recorded one. And so, yeah, last week's episode was, of course, one night only. It was the number one script on the blacklist. And it was a pretty good romantic comedy. And you guys out there agreed because you voted to greenlight it as well. So that's pretty cool. And I was really happy that the number one script was a comedy because comedies are, you know, kind of like a dying breed these days. If you do find them, they're not really in theaters. They're on Netflix or Hulu or some other streaming service. So it's so this one is one I hope gets picked up and we're able to look out for in the near future. And then we switch over from romantic comedy to survivalist thriller this week, right? So that's gonna be something to check out. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started, guys. Because we had the week off. Now let's hit the ground running with the live show back in order again. Welcome to Scripts on Saturdays, the only screenplay review show on the interwebs, discussing scripts both professional and amateur, circulating around Hollywood, giving you, the TV and movie-going audience, a behind-the-scenes and inside track on what writers are pushing and what producers are buying. I am your host, the Script Doctor, and joining me this week, returning co-host Raul. So happy to have you back, sir. Now, fun fact here. When we set up the shows for this, I do give out like a full list of what scripts we're going to be doing and some of the days. Raul, this one you picked really quick to get on here, so I'm very excited to talk to you about this one. This week's script is titled American Monsters. It came in 23rd place on last year's Blacklist with 16 votes. The logline is a senator and his estranged son must fight to survive when they're stranded at a hunting ranch where mythical beasts from global folklore are genetically engineered as dangerous game. Raul, please share with us the synopsis for American Monsters.
All right. So Senator Remy Chatelain, desperate to save his faltering re-election and his estranged son Zach, yearning for a real bond, are invited to a Montana ranch by Remy's friend Lane. Remy chases political salvation, but Lane's ranch harbors monstrous cryptids engineered for elite hunts. Betrayed to secure a bill, Remy and Zach must survive unleashed creatures. As they fight, the monsters are set free, trapping them in a deadly wilderness with no escape.
Yeah. So it's a most dangerous game meets Jurassic Park meets aliens type of thing. Um,
Yeah, which like it ended up so low on the blacklist. I don't know why nobody seems to like this,
yeah, it seemed to
but
be
I
have
thought it
like
was a really interesting concept.
yeah, it's very high concept, easy to get. I mean, just naming off randomly how many movies have mythical creatures like a chupacabra or a yeti. Um, I mean, Loch Ness monster. There's a Manananagaral, which is like some sort of bat creature thing. Ushi is another one mentioned here. Um, so yeah, like these things are messed up, and we don't see them single a lot of time unless it's in like a really cheap independent movie.
I
um,
was gonna say most of the time you probably find these in like horror movies, especially more on the indie side, like you said. I would like to see these done really well though in a movie like this. I think it'd be interesting. And I looked up, I was Googling some of these because I don't know what they look like or what the depictions of them are.
mhm.
Some of them look pretty horrific, so I think it could be interesting to show it on screen and stuff. Especially with this, it's like kind of set in the mountains, like snowy ridges and stuff. Sometimes you don't know what you're coming up against. I think it'd be interesting. I like the idea.
Oh, I like the concept too. So this story takes place in Montana. I guess this guy purchased the old Yellowstone Ranch and decided to convert it into this hunting park because this does take place in the not too distant future, kind of like in the 2030s or 2040s, I think, something around that era. There's no real highlight as to how advanced or futuristic the world is. It's just, yeah, it's like 10 years in the future. And it's leaning mostly on genetic engineering. It's got one heck of an interesting opening. Do you want to take the lead on that one, Raul? A little bit about this opening in this park. Kind of harkens back to, the first scene of Jurassic Park, but in a more appropriate way for this story.
Yeah, it's. I thought it had a really good opening because most scripts, the way that they start out, depending on what the subject is anyway, they do a lot of world building. It's sort of slow. It's introduces you to some of the characters. This one, I think, because of the subject matter and the genre that it is, like this actiony, very action-packed style, drops you sort of right into the middle of the action, so to speak. So it's sort of like a little bit of a like almost like a prologue or something.
Mm-hmm.
We meet this guy. I think eventually, he's like, I think they describe him like scribbling down notes. He's clearly there to check out what's going on. I believe there's a snowstorm going on right at the
Yeah.
very beginning. And we're sort of dropped in with him. He's like hiding, going through the forest, running for cover, that sort of thing. Um, and yeah, the snowstorm's going on, so we know we're in the mountains somewhere. I don't even think he has any dialogue lines. I think it's just, for the most part, just sort of setting the scene and showing us around what we later find out is going to be this ranch and what becomes the hunting grounds for the ranch, which is like this mountainous, what is it, like the clearing within like a mountain range or whatever.
Yeah.
And so he's running around. As he runs around, it's implied that he's being chased by something. You hear sort of like screeching sounds, so you're probably dealing with something monster-wise. And then I think as he's running away and trying to hide for cover, he sort of slips, and he's like batting away with his hands and realizes he's on a frozen lake,
Yeah.
where it's not easy for him to get up, and he sort of slipped and fallen down, and he can sort of hear whatever's chasing behind him start getting kind of closer. Um, and he tries to beeline it sort of for the row of trees ahead of him, presumably to try to make it to safety. And as he does, right before he reaches the tree line, he's sort of snatched from view, and we don't know what it is. We hear the screeching, we hear the sounds, but it's not described exactly what it is.
It's not described what it is. We are led to believe it's something that flies because later, like, blood just drops from the sky and just hits the frozen pond and some of the ground area. And I mean, it's pretty cool. It's like something got loose and it took out this dude. We don't know what it is. All we hear is it sounds, and of course, it's the most inhuman, unrecognizable thing ever. So the whole idea is the audience is not supposed to know what it is. And I'm like, this is a pretty good start, a good visual. It's short. It's only like 2 pages, not even really.
Yeah.
And then we cut into we do a time jump, a very reasonable one, 8 months later. So it's been almost a year, and now we get introduced to our main character, who's one of our main characters. It's first one is this kid named Zach. He's 17. He's a black kid that likes to do punk metal music and stuff. He plays guitar. He's at a sold out show. He's slugging beers, underage, of course. And and so he starts his show, and then we quickly cut to his father named Remy, and it's Remy Chatelain. And he's got this Louisiana Creole accent to him, so that's pretty cool. I mean, I like that idea. We got a little of a distinction of a character. He's not just kind of a flat, non-regional dialect type of politician. And he's in the process of trying to get this new bill killed. We don't know the details of the bill. All we know is that he doesn't like it. He's got like an interview with a journalist on television that's not really going over so well. We find out he's 8 points trailing his competitor, His opponent, he is the incumbent. He's been a senator for Louisiana for a number of years, and so you find out that he's this kind of like really focused politician. Even his aide comes in and says, "Hey, we got these two senators on our side to kill this bill. All we need is one more to make sure it doesn't pass." And he's like, "Okay, find this person." And he's like, "Well, it's like 10:30 at night. I'm tired." And he's like, "Yeah, you deserve a rest. Go clean out your desk and leave." Kind of cold and brutal. And then Remy ends up finding the senator and convinces her to join on his side of the bill. So we get a little bit of politicking here. And while he's doing this, he's getting a couple of calls from like an unknown number he doesn't recognize. When he finally answers it, turns out it's the police. And they picked up his kid for, I think, drinking and driving, if I'm not mistaken, or something of that nature. And they haven't released it to the press or anything. And so we find out that, yeah, Remy and his son, Zach, have kind of a complicated relationship ever since the mother left both of them, essentially. And, it's he doesn't know how to fix it or reconcile it. And then he's also getting other calls from his old friend Lane, who has this very boisterous Texan accent, and he's saying, "You got to come with me out on the weekend. I want to show you this great thing." The one thing that kind of threw me off is, and maybe this might be a real thing in the future, I don't know, but he's basically like, "Hey, pick up your phone. It's from the guy that used to beat your butt in Smash Bros." I'm like, is that something that would really? I wonder if that would be a thing for people in their 40s in the late 2030s, I guess, maybe. Like I thought that was kind of weird.
It probably relates. Yeah, it probably relates. I mean, that the people that played it as a kid, I guess, are getting older, so it probably brings back something for them. But I like it. The one thing I was going to say too with this whole intro, I like the fact that they made his son a punk rocker. I don't know why, that just gives me like early 2000s vibes of what, like all those coming of age movies and stuff like that, where everybody was into rock at the beginning of the 2000s and stuff. It's just interesting. I guess you don't really see it that much nowadays.
No, I mean, yeah, all the music now is kind of more on poppy and auto-tuned and everything. And now here you have like a live band playing a show. Amateurly.
You think they would have made him a DJ with the way things are nowadays?
DJ, or it'll be like on social media. There wouldn't be any sort of like live performances. But I mean,
yeah,
I will say you kind of have an interesting view of this type of not so distant future of like, oh, people still go to live shows. That I like that. I would like to do that now if people were ever performing.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, and it's sort of like a local. Well, he's got a small band, right? So it's like a local, like kind of dive bar scene type of thing. I like it. I used to go to shows like that all the time in dive bars, and it's interesting. I liked it.
Oh yeah, there's before the pandemic, me and some of my friends, we'd go to places along Queen Street in downtown Toronto, and there'd be a couple of like really small pubs or bars there with a stage, and then you'd have a local musical act performing, and
yeah,
not many of them were good, but if there was one that was good, you couldn't hear anything other than the music because everybody was just it was packed in there. So that's something that I'm like, oh yeah, that'd be nice to see coming back again. So yeah, like of course the senator pulls his political power. He gets his kid avoiding charges and all that type of stuff, and he takes him home, and he's reminiscing about how his teenage son is not as fun as he used to be when he was a kid, when they used to go hunting, and they were hunting like real game, and it wasn't for trophy, it was for like they'd kill it, they would skin it, cook the meat, eat it, and all that type of stuff, which definitely feels like a throwback to a bygone era, which is cool, which is pretty cool. And while he's doing this, Leon is calling him and saying, "Hey, come on out here. Let me show you something. It's going to be great. It's going to revolutionize the world." And of course, Remy saying, I'm falling in the polls. I gotta work politics and whatnot. He's like, "No, just take a weekend off. Get out of the rat race and come do this. Nothing's going to change in a weekend for you." And then of course he's like, "Well, my kids kind of getting antsy." He's like, "Bring your kid too. It'll be fun." And he's like, weekend getaway with my kid, seeing an old friend. And he's going to be flown out privately in Lane's jet to Montana. And so, boom, we cut straight there. And of course, on the plane, the kid is, asking questions, and the dad, Remy, is working on his laptop, still politicking. So we got more of this, this distant relationship here. And I like that Zach was pushing to try and get more interaction out of his father, and that his father was like, saying, okay, fine, I'll close the laptop. I'll no work for this weekend, I promise. And we know that's going to be a lie. And
Yeah, and it's interesting because in contrast to the first opening scene that sort of sets up maybe where this is going to go, they spent, I mean, what, the first 10 pages or so kind of setting up this relationship between father and son. Um, which is nice. It
mhm.
slows it down a little bit, and it's sort of the introduction to the movie, right? It kind of gives you a picture of what life was before all of this is going to happen. And like you said, he has this troubled relationship with his father. You get a little bit of a sense of what the son is interested in with his music, and sort of that longing connection with his father, and the fact that his father's like all business, no play sort of type of politician, always working on his laptop and stuff. So it's nice that. The beginning part of this, at least within the first 10 pages, really focuses on their relationship before we sort of get into the rest of the story,
Yeah,
which I thought was nice.
and it's nice because it wasn't just like relationship for the sake of relationship. There was goals going on. Zach is dealing with the fact that his dad never shows up to his shows, and his music is his passion. And then his dad is concerned about getting this bill killed and somehow pulling ahead in this upcoming election at the same time. So we've got these two conflicts here. What's great is we get introduced to a couple of characters. One is like Kate Carpenter. She's kind of like this liaison between the guests and the ranch, like a middle lady. She's very enthusiastic. You can tell it's put on as a show. She may even not like her job or not. But like they get off the plane and they go into like the Jeep, and it's like, yeah, you're gonna love what we've got here. And of course, both Zach and Remy are trying to say like, well, what's the hunting like? Well, if we're going hunting, what is it? What's the game? And she's like, oh no, Lane will kill me if I spoil it this early. So it's really time to build up the anticipation. Of course, they come to their main gates, which I assume probably look very similar to what we saw in Jurassic Park, or some sort of variation of. And that's where you find out like the name of this place is called the Cryptid Mountain Hunting Ranch. Now, for those of you that may not know, cryptid is basically an umbrella term for mythological creatures. And so it kind of tips their hat there for the informed, and for those that are like, the kids or the people in high school or young adults that just haven't decided to venture out into mythological creatures in its entirety, which I don't blame many people too, because why would they ever include that in education, private or public or otherwise? Yeah, so you're still figuring out what's going on. But Lane comes down here, and he's this kind of like, same age as Remy. They're best friends from times before. They used to, get drunk and high and play video games and, to speculate and imagine like a world of this or a world of that. And Lane's basically saying, I did it. I found a way to do it. I pulled it off. We're going to be hunting things you've never hunted before. And this doesn't quite sit well with Remy, because when he kind of we learn from him in his conversation with Zach that when they go hunting, they're not going hunting for trophies. They're going hunting, for something that is a bit more like useful. It's like, we're going to use the animal that we kill. We're not just doing it for posing for a picture and then dumping the carcass. We're going to use all the meat, use all maybe harvest leather out of it or whatever. Like it's very, very traditional form. It's not hunting for the sake of showmanship. It's hunting for the sake of, we're going to use something out of this. And Remy is not able to figure out like, well, what's the value in hunting a mythical creature? Can you eat it? and of course the joke is like, well, it doesn't taste like elk, but we whatever we don't use, we feed to the other animals. And you're like, that's kind of morbid.
Yeah, I think they said like what they grind it up and send it to other farms or something in the area or whatever, and I was like, oh, that's kind of gross. And it was cool because before this too, on the way up to the ranch, they encounter like a what was it, like a buck or something like that, but it's enormous. Like this thing is huge.
Like two or three times
And
this normal size or something. Yeah.
yeah, and it sort of gives you the indication, like if, like you said, if you didn't know what cryptid meant either, but it kind of gives you an indication that something strange is going on. That there's this huge like mutant buck walking around or whatever. So it's like, what else is in store? One thing I will say, which I actually wanted to bring up, which was even at this point in the story, the people that we get introduced to. I like the fact that everybody has a distinct voice.
hmm
At least I don't know if you found that in the script too, but as I was sort of picturing this in my head or imagining it as I was reading along, um, everybody has their own distinct character, which some of the other scripts that I've been on the show and read too, you don't get that sometimes. Some of the characters feel like they're
One voice across.
being voiced.
Yeah.
Yeah, being voiced by the same person. I mean, which is the author, right, or whatever, but the script writer. But this one, you get a spectrum of people. The politician, the way he talks is written sort of like a politician. You get the idea in his conversations. The son being sort of more punkish, punk rock, whatever. His friend that has the whole Texan attitude going on. It's a very distinct group of characters, which I like. At least it gave everybody like a part to play sort of in the script.
Y-
Which, like I said, you don't get that all the time. So I
you
thought that was a
don't.
good touch.
Well, one of the things that Lane does that really distinguishes himself is that he calls everybody Bud. He's like,
Yeah.
"Hey, Bud, how you doing, Bud? How's it going, Bud? Come here, Bud. Let me show you this, Bud." And you're like, "Okay, yeah, like that's his thing." And I can see actors really like chewing on that and having fun with that type of stuff. Um,
I don't know. Who were you? Were you picturing anybody when you read this?
oddly enough, with Lane Marlowe, I was thinking of like a young John Goodman from back in
Yeah,
that
either
time.
uh, John Goodman or God, what's his name? I just saw an article with him, the guy that played Big Lebowski,
Oh, Jeff
Jeff
Bridges.
Bridges.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe something like that. Like he seems like the type that maybe could play this too.
Oh, totally. And I was thinking even like oddly enough like Don Cheadle for Remy because
Yeah,
like
yeah,
he's
yeah.
got that because I mean, he's not described as a big guy. He's kind of like a wiry type of dude and a politician. And it's like, yeah, Don Cheadle's played roles similar in that vein. He could do it well. Um,
Yeah.
we then get, of course, what's her name, Sydney Harver, who she's ex-marine, ex-military marine, um, badass woman, but mostly just badass with a gun, not in any sort of physical sense, and she knows it, which was also a nice touch. And she's the fiance to Lane, and she's the one that's head of a lot of the mercenaries that they've hired to control the lands of this ranch. Because another thing that Remy brings up is like, so we're hunting inside of like a giant fenced off area, and he's like, well, it's so large that you don't even realize there's a fence there, so it feels like there's natural habitat. And so every criticism that Remy brings up, Lane's got an answer for. And they've developed a system called the Halo system, which means that if you're within this ring, you're fully protected. Like none of the beasts or creatures or animals in the area can come through that part. And then in order to prove it, he kind of does this like this showcase thing where this large like clear cube rises from the middle of the ranch grounds from where they're sitting at this in this beautiful luxurious kind of estate, and inside is a giant genetically improved grizzly bear. Like it's like two or three times the size of what they are normally, and so they release the grizzly bear. It's coming out, and all of a sudden, chupacabra like just leaps out of the I guess the tree brush, and we're seeing a fight between a chupacabra and a grizzly bear. And of course, this is like shocking and intriguing for Zach and Remy. And then the chupacabra manages to kill the grizzly bear, and then you think, oh wow, that's crazy. And then all of a sudden, a yeti comes out and kills the chupacabra. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of funny. Are they going to do another one? Like, what's the bigger animal that's going to come out and kill the yeti? Nope, they don't. They didn't do that. The yeti took care of the chupacabra, and then they go away in there. Lane does this offhand remark about, yeah, the Yetis are the most intelligent here, and they're also the ones that breed the most. And then then we get the rules scene. Like, how does this work? Well, okay, so yes, we've genetically modified and engineered these mythical creatures to be real. We've then outfitted them with an implant in the back of their neck that is basically like a shock collar and also an explosive. So if they get near the halo regions, they get a shock to warn them off. And if they get right up to the border, they get an intense shock that will like really, really debilitate them. And if they cross, then the thing explodes, killing the creature instantly. And then it's only got one flaw, which is that a magnet will disable it. But you're out in a heavily forested area. There's no magnets to be found, so they figure everything is all good. And then Remy brings up a great question. He's like, well, if the Yetis are breeding a lot, how do you make sure that those children don't go into the halo? They don't have the they don't have the implant. And that's where Sydney comes in. She's like, yeah, our mercenaries, we go out pretty regularly, and we basically capture the kids, bring them back here, do the implant, condition them a little bit, and then release them back into the wild. And I'm like, that is pretty dark.
And it's the same thing as Jurassic Park, right? They're setting up all these rules, but then the stuff that they say, you're kind of like, okay, I mean, maybe something could go wrong with that. It doesn't seem like it's 100%. You're just thinking in the back of your head, like maybe it's not like 100% airtight, but they seem to be dispelling Remy's concerns and stuff, right?
Yeah, and doing so in a quickly logical manner by saying, yeah, we thought about that too, and this is our solution. Which is, in Jurassic Park, their solution was make all of the dinosaurs female. But the thing that you don't realize until much later is because they used reptilian DNA to complete the sequences of dinosaurs, and reptilian DNA can change their gender if they're in a low population environment. It means that some of the women that they've made, female dinosaurs that they've made, will become male and then procreate with the other females. And that was the twist in Jurassic Park. Here, they don't even care if it's male or female. They're just like, we just make them and breed whatever. And I was like, okay, so a little bit more reckless, but I understand what they're going for, which is that because these are deliberately creatures to be hunted, they need to breed, and they need to breed frequently so that you have lots of targets for the people that would come in here for this event. And yeah, so we get the run of the mill. We also get introduced to Co Akers, who is a punk rock band leader who I guess was canceled. So even though cancellation is kind of dampening down currently, it's got a resurgence in the future in this story. And
it somehow survived into the late 2020s/2030s.
Exactly. It's somehow it survived. But Co Akers is apparently like Zach's Zach is like the biggest fan of this guy. Like, he knows his music, he knows his history, he knows his controversy, he doesn't care. He thinks he's cool. And Co has been one of the silent partners of this venture, investing a ton of cash into it because he's also an avid hunter. And I'm like, okay, cool. So we've got a character here that Zach idolizes instead of his father. So now we can have like, what's sort of butting heads between Co and the dad. Now, sadly, this script doesn't really have that at all. Remy actually takes advantage of Co stealing his son's attention so he can talk shop with Lane, because Lane's basically saying like, listen, yeah, we're going worldwide with this thing. It's huge. It's great. My only problem is that there's a bill in the Senate that if it passes, or if it doesn't get passed, I'm going to lose out on my genetic modification license here. And we find out the ulterior motive is not just for Lane catching up with Remy and giving him his chance to reconnect with his son, but it's like, I need you, Senator, to make sure this bill passes so that I can stay in business. And this is where we get into some convoluted aspects, and I'll throw a little bit of it to you, Rel, and then I'll help clarify any further things. But yeah, he's basically saying that the loophole in this bill will allow him to thrive and basically start advertising coming to his ranch for hunting mythical game. And up until this point, Remy is like, this is a bill I don't like, and I've been spending the last several weeks trying to kill it. Now you're telling me to push it through. Raul, what sort of other, because it's a little convoluted, right? So let's try and dive into a little bit of this for the listeners out there.
Yeah, they start doing this little bit of convoluted stuff, and then they start basically talking politics while his son's distracted with this other guy, Ko, right? Sort of in the background. And yeah, I guess they start saying like it's a bunch of stuff apparently for like farmers. They sort of tried to like hide this thing in there and disguise it as sort of like this will be helpful for farmers. I think at one point he says something about well, whatever we were going to give them, like it's not worth it financially or whatever, because by the time they figure out a way to do this and profit from it, they're not even sure if they're going to be in business in the next couple of months or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So really all this stuff is sort of just a way to back end this deal that then allows him to make money off this thing, I guess. Um, yeah, I don't know. I feel like maybe we could have simplified this a little bit, or, I guess I guess when you follow the logic of what he's saying, some of the stuff doesn't make sense. Like he's got stuff set up all around the world, but how did he set that stuff up when he's waiting for this bill to kind of pass to get funding?
Mm-hmm.
Because they sort of make it sound in the conversation that this is sort of like a last ditch effort, basically, to pass this bill so that he can start getting funding. Otherwise, all of this disappears. And then like I thought as I was reading through this, I was like, well, maybe he invested the original money he had into like building the locations, but they're just not open yet. Because I'm thinking like, who staffs those places? Who like how does he have? Are they also doing the gene splicing and all that kind of stuff for those locations, or is it just here until he manages to get it off the ground and then it'll start in other places? Because I guess the idea was he was going to lean heavy into local folklore,
Yeah.
like mythology and stuff. So all of these different locations would have creatures specific to that country, which was part of the draw of this. And then you could go hunt like your mythological creatures or whatever. So, yeah, I don't know. Did you think it was convoluted as well with
I
all that?
I did because even if he did set up these things in other countries, which he said he did, then I'm like, well, the U.S. has its own laws, but those other countries have their own laws, and if there's no problem with you setting them up at that point, then there shouldn't be a problem with investing in those ones for the time being until you get a law passed in the state side that works to your benefit. It doesn't, like, he didn't couch it in a way where you could say like, this is like the home base, this is where every single one of those mythical creatures can be hunted, but in the countries where I'm going, it's only going to be of that each country's mythology. And the reason I want it here is that I want to be able to attract, tease them with the ones back home, and then bring them here where I can charge them a higher markup because of the diversity of mythical creatures type of thing. Like we saw what his actual like game plan was. If there's a little bit more details, which didn't have to go into too much explanation, I would have understood the urgency for this, where he basically has said like, yeah, I just need this bill passed because because this is so expensive, and because those other farmers, those other companies can't do what we do. We know we can last maybe, the rest of the year. Those guys couldn't last, the next few months, let alone the next year. So if you push this through, I'm going to survive, and they're still going to not, their businesses are going to die. But I didn't get a sense of real urgency here for it. I think it would have been better if he said, if I can make this one work here, I can then open up stuff elsewhere and expand the business. But that's not how it was framed. And
yeah, because it seems like a very logical thing would have just been like, well, if this doesn't pass here, there's billionaires in other countries that could try to attract, and then we could just close this location down and move somewhere else.
Yeah.
So it almost seems like maybe this problem could be sidestepped. But yeah, like you said, if it was like just a small change, like opening up other locations because we don't have the technology that we have here or something like that. I don't know. Since this is a little bit in the future anyway, I think it could have avoided the confusion, I think.
Yeah, and I also think it goes back to this other issue. So Remy, even though he's kind of like a cold politician, he has this very strong moral compass as it pertains to like agriculture and hunting and farming and whatnot. And I think this works counter to his character arc, because I think he should be the type of guy that's trying to push this bill through that actually like prohibits genetic, or that is for genetic modification and everything. And I would love it if it was tied into the fact that Remy already agreed. Yeah, this is the goal, to do it. Oh, and this is the surprise that you're showing me, is that mythical creatures, and that part should actually cause him some conflict, because one of the arguments that he makes why he's not so enthusiastic about this is that hunting traditionally is creatures that exist, and it's hunting for a need. Here you've created creatures that never existed before, and so hunting them doesn't really have a need aside from like just power, saying I got to kill a yeti or a chupacabra or whatever. And he doesn't see any value to that. And that would have been interesting, because then now we have a question of his own morals, right? Like if we found out in the beginning, in the first act, where he wants to push this bill through because not only is he doing it as a favor to his friend, but he's very much a hunting advocate, and this allows for various types of experimental hunting and what have you. And then he sees what his friend has done, and it's like, well, this doesn't align with what I was doing. And maybe he has to start questioning his own morals, because that's what you want to do with your main characters. You want to put them in situations that are not easy to get out of, and that they have to make a choice or reevaluate their own point of view. And instead, it's like, nope, this is just kind of re-cementing what Remy's initial point of view is over and over and over again. And his arc at this point is like, can he win back his son's love?
Yeah, because in terms of if you're talking about the most important thing for a script, right, the character development anyway is the conflict. And if you're talking about the internal conflict here, he starts off, like you said, in this sort of like morally upstanding position, I guess, trying to kill this bill that you then find out could also hurt farmers and whatever. So it's like, okay, he's got the right idea then, and then at the end of the script, it's sort of like you said, just reinforces the fact that he was right from the very beginning. That doesn't feel like much of a character arc. I feel like if you make it so that he's very shrewd, maybe even profits from this bill somehow, or maybe passing this bill guarantees his reelection, so he's willing to do whatever, even if it screws over other people. But then you still have the redeeming human quality of like, he wants to have a relationship with his son. Like that's already humanizing him, where you could make the other conflict more about like his internal moral conflict, and then he changes to the end where he's like, oh, I shouldn't do this.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that gives him a more solid arc. Whereas when you have a character that like starts in the same place and then ends in the same place, in terms of the overall story conflict, it's kind of like, okay, it could have been more interesting if there was a little bit more change there. It almost gives me like Westworld, right?
Yeah.
Where they're sort of going in and explaining all like how the park works and stuff, and it's like, you know, at first the character is shocked or whatever. I'm thinking of the show because I watched it more recently, but is kind of shocked that you can just shoot anybody and kill anybody and whatever. And it's sort of, he doesn't like it sort of like morally, right? And then his friends trying to convince him or whatever. And I feel like it could have been something like that, where then Remy noticed witnessing all this stuff, and then the kind of what happens later on in the script makes him change his mind about all this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that would have made for a much more dramatic character arc, and one that hits a bit stronger for this part here. Because, I mean, they also try to put in, like, he is a vicious politician, because before they even do their first hunt, Ko's like, oh, yeah, I've heard of you, Senator. I heard that you were in the news a lot. We find out that, and this is another point that kind of reinforces, like, the criticism, is that we find out that he released a tape about an adversary in the Senate that liked to cheat on his spouse with, you know, prostitutes and what have you. And the only reason he released this tape was to stop this campaign against him that was lying about his relationship with his ex-wife, like saying that she was cheating on him or that he used to beat her or whatever. And he basically said, I got this blackmail on you. Stop telling people about this fiction about my family, and I will not release this. And then he said no, and he kept on telling it, so he released the video, and then that guy got expelled from office. He lost his seat and all that stuff. And it's like, okay, so you've given us an evil act that's done out of revenge for another evil act. So you still kind of put him closer onto the moral high ground here. And I was just thinking, no, it shouldn't have been that way. He should have said, like, I got this tape because I want you to vote this way on this particular bill, and if you don't do that, I'm exposing the tape, and then the new person coming in will then vote the way I need. Because we want to see this, we need to see that character change. It's really, really important to see a character change like that. But again, Remy is now always in the position where he's kind of like the moral compass of the script. I usually prefer like the kid character to be that, especially if it's like a father-son story or what have you. Like the kid should be embodying the morals that the parent taught them, that the parent has lost because of the ambitions in order to provide for their family. Like you have to kind of have the kids bring you back home, because the kid sees the world for the first time, and how they interpret that is a reminder from the parent of how they saw the world for the first time. And it kind of sort of brings them back home to like, yeah, well, the world is more complicated, but there are some areas that they seem gray as an adult, but you know, when you look at it more innocently, it's like, nope, this is good and this is bad, and the grays are really just an excuse to justify, an action that is counter to what you believe in. And right. I think that's like what we have an issue with in the first half of the second act is, yeah, Remy he's the guiding North Star of morality in this script. So much so that even go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just gonna say, because with the two characters, then the main characters, right, which is Remy and his son, you get Remy that, like you said, continues to have like this moral compass the whole time, but it's kind of hinted like so does the son, because the son's sort of uncomfortable with what's happening, and he's sort of like, at first when they get there, he's sort of hesitant about it, and then he gets caught up with the whole idolizing Ko, right, and then sort of like being enthralled by the mythical creatures or whatever, but he's still kind of like skeptical about what's happening. So instead of having Remy be the one that has lost his moral compass, and then he sort of, his son reminds him of sort of what's important, you get both of them that are sort of still a moral compass. So it just makes the conflict, like, it lessens the conflict a little bit.
Yeah, it does. Because I would have liked either way, where either Remy is the moral compass and his son is behaving and needs a dad to kind of get him back in line, or the opposite, where, the kid knows what's right and wrong. He made a mistake, but now he sees his dad is really going off the rails of what he taught him, and so he's like, I got to bring you back. Those dynamics are far more entertaining to watch. Sure, some people can say they're cliche, but they work, and that's where you get the cliche from. It's like, people to keep doing it because they know it works. And in this situation here, we have a different type of framing device for it, where it can kind of feel fresh, because we're dealing with. I mean, you're also dealing with like the controversy of hunting, right? Like, do people hunt for sport or do they hunt for food? And in this case here, it's like, well, here's a couple of characters that are like, well, we think we're hunting. It's better to hunt for food, and Lane is like, no, we're going to hunt for sport, and that's a good debate to have. And unfortunately, that's kind of glossed over in this part of the script. At least at first, it gets more heavy-handed towards the end of the second act, but. Yeah, so I mean, regardless of like Remy's reservations, Lane is excited to take these guys out for a hunt, and they decide to go out. And their first thing that they're hunting, if memory serves, is the chupacabra, right? If I'm not mistaken, that's the first thing that they're going after. And
yeah, I believe so.
Yes, and then what's funny is that on their way to track down the chupacabra, they'd run into fairies. Like genetically modified fairies. They're not Tinkerbell-like. They're more. They have her wings, but they're like 8 to 10 inches in size, and they're more like spidery creatures, I think, with wings.
Yeah, I think they described them as like goblin-y type of creatures with wings,
right?
And then
Right.
they pop out of the brush or whatever, and then as soon as they see them, they basically start darting straight towards them and stuff and attacking. So they're very aggressive.
Yeah, they're very aggressive, and it reminded me a little bit of like Jumanji with the giant mosquitoes and stuff that they're picturing around. There was a scene right before they go onto this morning hunt where Remy gives Zach like his great grandfather's gun that he stole from Nazi Germany when they were fighting the Germans, 100 years ago. And Zach is like, oh, this is really cool. And he tries to get refamiliarize himself with the gun because they haven't gone hunting in years. And Remy's like, yeah, it's going to come back to you. And of course, now when these fairies are coming after him, they're shooting them out of the sky like skeet. And then the Chupacabra shows up, and then they successfully kill the Chupacabra. And they're like, they're on the adrenaline high, and they think this is all pretty good. And Remy is kind of warming up to it a little bit, but he still has his reservations because he's fascinated by these creatures existing for the first time ever. But it swings back again to that whole hunting debate, which is I don't see the point to this. Like, what is the use of these creatures once they're dead, compared to if you kill a deer, you got a deer. If you kill a cow, you got meat and leather, and there's other uses. This does give concern to Lane, especially when they're talking more about the technology and how they're talking about how the Yetis they used to build their own houses, or stone houses, and then now they start hiding in caves. and it's basically subtly implying that the Yeti are a lot more intelligent than expected. And Lane and Sid have a conversation about how maybe the next, when they capture the next set of kids, they tinker with their genes to make them more stupid and more instinctual as opposed to intelligent.
Yeah, I think he toned down their intelligence or whatever, which brings up an interesting debate, which I feel like they could have gone further into, because you're talking about genetic splicing and modification and stuff. And that's an interesting topic. I feel like you could have done more with in this script, because they sort of gloss over all that. Even Jurassic Park touched on it, right? That was the whole thing about should we mess with nature? Do we want to mess with nature? Letting sort of opening Pandora's box, and then you're not able to close it once you've opened it, right? That was the whole thing, and that was a point that they sort of lingered on in Jurassic Park, which I feel like could have gone further here. They could have driven the point even more, because they're creating these creatures specifically to be killed, and they're doing the genetic modification thing, and but they sort of gloss over all that. It's sort of this is what we're doing. Maybe we'll dumb them down when we get the kids or whatever, and that's sort of it. They sort of, and then I think it moves on or whatever. But yeah, I feel like they could have made more of a point of that, or at least it could have been something that, if we, like we said with Remy, if the conflict would have been a little bit different, I feel like maybe this could have been something that starts to change his mind, or at least he sees or this confirms that not just the killing that changes his mind, but also sort of talking about this, you can sort of maybe see the gears start to turn a little bit. And it could have been more impactful, I feel like. I don't know.
It really could have, because we only get a little bit of a touch on that. And that is another point that Remy brings up, which is, a deer, a wolf, a bear, they don't know that they're being hunted in general. They're just out there to survive. They're running on mostly instinct. They don't know. But if you've genetically engineered these creatures specifically to be killed, and the Yetis are the most intelligent, they're going to figure out that their entire existence is only to be hunted, and that's going to make them very, very dangerous. And that ends up kind of being a little bit of the case. After they do the hunt, and the thrill kind of dies down, Lane implores Remy to really reconsider about that bill, saying that I need you to pass this, because if you do, we're going to do great. And if you think that you're going to lose the election, you won't, because I can call all these important people. They'll rally behind you. They'll give you all the money you need for your campaign. They'll promote you. They'll make sure you secure your seat. And Remy's just saying, I can't push this bill through, but there could be another one that we could actually do to allow you this exception, so that you can, so that your business can run off. It'll just take a few months, and it'll be after the election. And Lane's impatience is not working on that. And so he's like, well, okay, if that's what it's going to be, that's what it's going to be. They turn in for the night, and then all of a sudden they're woken up by some weird tapping on the glass of the skylights. And we find out that there's the entire cabin is surrounded by chupacabras The power has gone out, you know, as things tend to do in these types of park situations. And they can't find Lane or Sid, but they do see some blood trails leaking, stretching out of the cabin. And so it's now Ko and Remy and Zach grabbing whatever they can together and fending off basically a chupacabra attack on the house. And this is where we kind of get into set piece the movie. It's a lot of set pieces after one another. So you got a set piece in the bedroom, a set piece in the living room, a set piece in the kitchen. All pretty similar to what we've seen in some other movies of this type, mainly Jurassic Park, especially like with the raptors, because that's why I was thinking like, okay, the chupacabras are behaving like raptors here. They're crawling on walls, they're grabbing their victims, they're not killing them right away, they can open doors, all the stuff that should really send chills up an audience's spine when they're seeing this on the screen. That's what's happening in this moment. And we've split apart our group. So like Ko and Zach and Remy, they're all on their own and they're trying to get back together so that they can have a better chance of survival at this point. They're freaking out that the power's down. They're freaking out that Lane and Sid have probably been killed. And I thought some of the description for these action set pieces were pretty bang on. I understood the geography of the location. I liked how even though these creatures are genetically engineered, they somehow managed to program, I guess, the behavior that that's associated with their legend of how like the chupacabra, they don't kill their prey right there. They kind of like disable them and then drag them to wherever their base of operations is, and then that's where they kill and feast on their bodies. And I thought that's pretty cool. I mean, I don't know how they pulled that off, but I like that they did.
Yeah, a lot of these. I sort of, like I said, I was sort of Googling and looking into some of these because I had never heard of them before. But yeah, they, they're pretty. They stick to their character, their mythology, or whatever, um, which was interesting. And then because the day before they had sort of run into the Yetis,
Yeah,
and sort of discovered like you said, they live in caves now, so they're sort of implied that they're getting smarter and sort of trying to survive and setting up their own thing. And Yeah, so it was interesting. I liked it. And then the Yetis are like multiplying or whatever at an alarming rate, and then they're sort of in the cave, like you sort of find out that one of them's trying to protect basically their kid or their little Yeti or whatever. And then yeah, the chupacabras come, and then I think right after this, isn't it the Mana, whatever the
oh
flying
yeah,
thing is?
the Mana Nangal. Yeah, which are
Yeah.
these weird flying bat-like creatures. Yeah, because again, I'm just reminded of this now because I read the script a couple days ago for the second time, and I just forgot. Like, there's a point where Remy is on the hunt with a bow and arrow, and he's got like this custom set of arrowheads, and everyone is, except for his son, is encouraging him to take out this one Yeti, but the Yeti does this one thing where he gets something in his eye and he starts rubbing it and blinking and he's trying to get it out of the eye, and it's such a human behavior that Remy just can't bring himself to release the bowstring and kill this creature. So instead he tries to he tries to scare it to run away by like missing it deliberately, but the Yetis don't run away, they actually charge at him, and then he has to be like exfiltrated out. And then that's what leads it in. So I apologize, listeners, I skipped over that, but that was actually a moment where it reinforces again, Remy is the type of guy who doesn't believe in this sort of thing, where I think if he did kill the Yeti, and then saw the reaction to the other Yetis, that would have probably been more of a resonating part, because then you have the character, you have an inciting incident to his character change, where he's been told and he believes that yes, these are kind of semi-mindless creatures, and he's took one out, and then all of a sudden he sees them, the Yetis crying and wiping tears from their eyes. I'm like, that would be a very human thing. That would make him
Yeah.
realize, like, holy crap, I didn't just kill an animal, I killed a sentient being, like a very sentient being.
Yeah, and they try to do it later on with the when they go into the cave or whatever, and then realize that the Yetis have started doing like cave drawings almost,
Yeah.
where they draw the like fe kind of like a fence, and then there's a human on the other side holding. They say a stick at first, but realize it's a gun, and then there's like a barbed wire fence or something like that. So obviously they realize that they're in this arena and they can't escape. They're basically just being hunted.
Hmm.
And that's sort of the humanizing moment for them with these Yetis. So yeah, but like I think the thing we were saying before with Remy, it's sort of like, okay, he's against this bill. He realizes that it could be bad. He doesn't want to hunt just for power or sport, and then it's sort of just reinforced with this Yeti scenario as well. So um, it's sort of like, he's still got that moral compass or whatever. Like he realizes that this is wrong. This event just sort of reinforces what he already believed.
Yeah, and it reinforces something we, as observers of the script, we as potential audience members of this movie, have already learned. It's you're you're really just reinforcing this idea when these are the type of moments that are supposed to stimulate change in the character. You know, push against
Yeah.
their initial ideologies to reevaluate themselves. Um,
And then it could have heightened the conflict between him and his son. Like if his son saw him kill the Yeti,
yeah,
without remorse at first, and then they go into the cave and find this stuff and realize they're being hunted and they're smarter than they thought. And then later on, it could come up like, Dad, how could you do this or whatever. It's just it could have been an opportunity to like build the conflict even further, and then sort of get the realization for Remy that like, oh yes, maybe I have gone too far or whatever, right?
yeah. I mean that you kind of want that you kind of want to have that point of no return. Not just in the physical sense for the character, but also in the emotional sense of the character and the point of view of the character, where the reason they have that point of no return, the reason that they've entered that lowest point in their story is because everything they had learned up to this point and everything that they believed in up to this point has been challenged and has caused them to be at this failure point. So
Yeah.
the thing is like, okay, do I change my point of view and then enact a new plan so that I can survive or make it to the end of this, or do I double down and do what I do, and hopefully that'll make it to the end, or hopefully that, or unfortunately, it'll lead to their demise. That's part of the drama with storytelling. And this area here, sadly, we don't really get that going on. What we do get is like it goes straight into survival mode, and I mean, it's pretty thrilling. I like how when they manage to hold off the chupacabras, Ko, who is, he's been basically living in this ranch for like almost a year now. He knows it well. He knows how it works. He's like, okay, we're at this little cabin. We're at this really luxurious cabin in the middle of the ranch. We got to get back to the main estate. This is the best way to do it. We can take the tram down here. If we go on foot, it'll take a couple of hours, but there's a 4x4, like an ATV over here in this shed. That'll take a couple hours off so we can go to the tram and then we can get down and then we'll be safe. And so we got a clear plan. So it's the three of them. They have a few weapons. They have limited ammunition. There's this thing called like Reti, which is kind of like this mobile fridge of armaments. But it's been kind of ransacked, and it's got a little bit of AI to it. The one thing is like you can say "ready, party down," and then they'll start doing like neon lights and doing music and stuff. And of course, like that comes into play as a distraction for whatever creatures are nearby that thing. And so yeah, we just follow them on this journey where they're kind of going through. They have to cross this ranch to get to the private estate where everything is safe, and on that journey, they encounter all the other animals, and no one is safe. And we can talk a little bit about those encounters because it doesn't get to anything of the spoiler yet. It's just survival in the land. So they get away from the chupacabras. Then there's the Mananangral that are flying after them that they're shooting and trying to get cover with. Then they go back to that lake. So the frozen lake we saw at the beginning of the script, they're on that again. However, because it's a slightly warmer climate, the lake is starting to thaw. So when they're walking across it, it's cracking and it's causing issues. And Ko and Remy and Zach are trying to like navigate it quickly. And then at the same time, they can hear the Mananangal. It's hard to say this name. The Mananangal, the fairies, and even some of the chupacabras are kind of like after them. So you've got this great little setup where they have to get across this frozen lake. The frozen lake is starting to melt and thaw. Ice is not stable. It's cracking beneath them, and it's pretty cool as they're going. Yeah, they're shooting back with their limited ammunition to try and defend themselves. Some parts of the ice break off, and then fresh water's underneath, and so there's like floating ice islands around. And then we get this really cool silhouette of there's something underneath the lake. Do you want to share this
Obviously,
one, because this is pretty cool? I think you do a good job with that.
obviously, if you put a frozen lake and stuff starts cracking and you kind of it's thawing out or whatever, obviously it's a set piece to set up something really cool. So obviously there's something underneath the water, and I think they're still with Ko at this point, and they're basically trying to escape. Uh, yeah, one of the monster, right? They're trying to escape the mana whatever Nagral or whatever that's chasing
Mana
after
Nana
them, and
Grawl,
it's got
yeah.
yeah, and they shot it, and I think like its wings or it has some holes in its wings or whatever, but it's still chasing after them and flying above the lake, and Remy like pushes Zack down, and it flies over their head, and
Hmm.
sort of Poe's still fighting with it, and like you said, the ice starts cracking, and then all of a sudden you see. I think didn't they say there was like a tentacle or something? Like you start seeing like a tentacle or something underneath the water, like basically the shade or shape of this thing
Yeah,
sprawling out. And then as the ice cracks, up comes a huge head, and it's the Loch Ness monster from the famous tales, right?
yeah, from
And
Scotland.
bites right into Ko and sort of rips him apart, and that's when we say goodbye to Ko as part of the story there.
and
And
I
then
I was pretty surprised by that, because I'm like thinking, oh, cool, the Loch Ness monster. That's mythical, but there's been so many more sightings current day than there have of any of these other creatures here. And I was like, that's pretty cool. I dug that. I mean, I was worried would it be a kraken or something else, but no, they decided to go
yeah.
more Loch Ness monster. Um,
Well, I think I wasn't expecting it either. I was expecting something like a kraken or whatever too. I think, especially when they said a tentacle, like
yeah,
when they said something was you could see a tentacle underneath the water, and I was like, oh, that's like a kraken or something. And then it ends up being this cool, like the Loch Ness monster popping up and biting this guy in half or whatever, which I was like, oh, that's pretty cool.
yeah. I mean, I dug it because that was the one thing I wasn't expecting. I was because we kind of got a little tease of what they did make, and they all seemed basically like, you know, comparable to human size thing. When you're dealing with a Loch Ness monster, that's, a beast, like, it's the size of a train. It's like you don't expect you're gonna hunt that. Like that's pretty crazy. So
Well, everything else, like in terms of mythical creatures, has all been land-based, right? Like
yeah,
everything through the script so far has been climbing in trees, flying down from the trees, like something related to land anyway. And then it's cool how when they get on this lake, they bring in the one mythological creature that everybody knows, I guess, that's in a lake, right? And
yeah,
it's kind of cool to see the distinction anyway.
yeah, and it also shows, like, well, it raises the question: what other creatures are here that we don't know about yet? Like, what
Right.
has been seeded in this land? What other things could come through? And I think that's pretty cool, because we do get teased of this one creature that looks a lot like a tree, but they say, oh, you haven't figured that one out yet, so we haven't released it. And you're wondering,
Yeah.
well, are we certain about that? Like, are we certain that it's not released out there? That this is just the only one? Like, we don't know. Um, so yeah, like we
And I
then
will say,
yeah,
as far as the monsters are concerned, which I don't think we touched on yet, that was part of the appealing thing with this script, and I think that's why I chose it so fast after reading the log line, was that I love mythology. I like the folklore, the monster folklore stuff. I grew up with a lot of it, being from Europe. It was, it's a lot of stories about stuff like that. I mean, everybody's probably heard of like Baba Yaga and all
hmm
that sort of stuff. So really cool. I like the concept of this, and the fact that they managed to integrate these mythological creatures is a super cool idea to me. And I like this idea of pulling from different. I have a book on my bookshelf, which is all like lore and mythology and all these creatures and stuff from different cultures. So it's cool that they pulled that into this script from various countries and stuff like that, like mythology from all sorts of different places. The tree, I think, is like African folklore, or African mythology, or something like that. So that's cool. I really like the idea, and that they're coming from all over the place. I mean, Chupacabra is like what, South American or Mexican or whatever,
Yeah.
and then you get Loch Ness Monster and stuff like that. So it's from all over the world. They're pulling these monsters, which is a really cool idea.
Yeah, and I like the fact that they're throwing them all together where it's like what can get you? Like whether it's
Yeah.
around the rock face or under the lake or from the sky or in the cave, something is out there that's going to get you that's much worse than you think normally you would encounter, especially in like the the big plains of Montana.
Yeah, the Yetis are sort of they focus on the Yetis a lot in terms of after they kind of go up on the tram or whatever, and
Hmm.
then come to this hunting field. The somehow the Yetis end up being the least terrifying thing in this whole script, as far as things that can kill you.
Yeah, pretty much, and it highlights like one of the mistakes I saw in this script, which is there's a note to the reader and possibly producers, which says, "Yeah, we're going to use Yetis here, but if you don't like Yetis, we can change it to something else." And I as a
Yeah.
writer, am like, "No, commit to it. If the Yetis are as present in this script as you've had them, commit to Yetis. Be fine. Tell them like this is what it is. If you can change it to anything else, then it's not really about including Yetis. It's just about including this dynamic." And it feels a little bit more superficial that way. And it also conveys to me
Yeah.
that you're not as passionate or committed to this idea, that you're willing to just even entertain a change before they even want to ask the question. It basically just says, like, oh, you're just getting ahead of this question because you're not really interested, or maybe you have doubts about how well or effective you can do the Yetis, which I'd say to this writer, I think he did a really good job with the Yetis.
I think so too, and he made it like they had a conversation before that like I think someone mentioned it like in the script, wasn't it? It was Zach or somebody where they said Yetis, and Lane kind of butts in and he's like, "Oh yeah, the Bigfoot sightings and all that is nothing like what these Yetis are, or whatever." And
Yeah.
then the script sort of describes them as being, at least like kind of twice the size of a man, and they got this fur on them, and they're pretty vicious and whatever, but they're also smart. I thought so for the plot and everything else that they have going on. I thought the Yetis worked really well. I don't know why he would back away from that.
Yeah, I don't know why either. I think that's something the writer should just quickly remove in a subsequent draft of this. Just cut that line out. Don't even say it. Just let them know, like, if you should be more confident in how you did the Yetis, so that you'd convince even the biggest skeptic to be like, okay, yeah, I can see what you're doing here with this. Yeti works. Yeti's fine. Let's keep with the Yeti. Um,
Well, and it's sort of like I mean, out of all the monsters, like I said, they end up being sort of the most, I guess, like
yeah,
humanoid-ish type monsters. Everything else is like when I was looking up all these different mythology and stuff. I mean, the drawings and stuff that people they're horrific. Like, there's no way you could sort of humanize any of these other creatures. They're all like horror
they're
based type of
nightmares.
creatures or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah, exactly, nightmare. So it's like there's no way that you could have humanized any other type of thing. So I think he did a pretty good job balancing between like these are scary, and still vicious and stuff like that, but also managed to humanize them a little bit,
Yeah,
in the script. So it worked out for the purposes that he was trying to accomplish with them.
I think so too. And even on like the production side of things, because you've got a Yeti, all you got to do is put a guy in a suit and force perspective, and you've got maybe with an animatronic head for the mouth, and you've got something that can be pretty convincing in camera. And then you
Right.
play around. Then you put your CG budget into all the the flying creatures, and even with the
Yeah.
chupacabras, you don't need to do CG there. You just get some skinny mimes or clowns or something, put them in chupacabra makeup, and have them start crawling along the floor dressed to look like a wall or a ceiling and shoot it that way. Keep it in camera, keep it practical, keep it fun. Because I mean, you want what would sell this the most on a theatrical side of things is the most convincing effects and costuming you can possibly have for it.
Yeah.
Like if you were to CGI everything, it would probably take people out of the moment, and also Yetis are very hairy creatures, rendering every single strand of hair on their body for every shot, every frame. Takes a very long time. So I'd be like, nah, no, just put it in camera. Make it that way. Let the stunt guys have fun with, their physicality and doing everything in front of the actors and allowing the actors to properly react to what they're seeing
Yeah, and
before them.
you can sort of augment it if you want
Yeah.
with like CG and whatever, like even just the heads or make the mouth more scary or whatever you want. It's like the eyes maybe make them more menacing or something. But yeah, I mean, there's a practical way to do this, and I think it would be really good. As far as the Yetis, like you said, even probably the chupacabras as well.
Hmm.
And then yeah, use your budget for all the rest of the stuff like the flying things and there's what a chimera in here. I mean, that would probably be something that you could do. Um, Digital and probably Loch Ness or something like that, right? Because it'd be this huge like lake set piece or whatever. Um, but yeah, and then everything else could be a little bit more practical, gives the actor something to act off of,
Yeah.
and it would probably make it more convincing of a performance too.
I mean, I agree because I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, well, if you do it like traditional budget style things, yeah, you'd CGI a bunch of stuff and you'd have the actors, out in a couple of on location fields, then mostly probably inside of a volume apparatus, and then yeah, no matter how good the acting is, you're still kind of losing the illusion of it. So it'd probably be better if you invested instead of investing a few $1 million per shot on CG Yetis and Chupacabra, you take a tenth of that, make a dozen costumes or so of each Yeti character, of each Chupacabra character for stunts and whatnot, and do it in camera. And yeah, play around with your lenses. I mean, that's what force perspective works really well, and it's very convincing. I mean, Lord of the
Yeah.
Rings did it, and those hobbits definitely looked small all the time.
Well, and the rest of this movie isn't, I don't think would be that expensive to shoot anyway for the rest of it because there's not really much going on. Like it's not, like you said, this is in the future, but it's not that far into the future.
Hmm.
And they didn't, screenwriter didn't pack it full of like tech gizmos and whatever. That's like, I mean, the most you have is like the Ready, right? Which is the fridge, basically, equipment thing robot, and
Yeah.
that wouldn't be very expensive. I mean, it's literally just a box, right? Like a stainless steel box or robot or something. So it's not the rest of it is, and then you're on a ranch, right? So it's
Hmm.
basically forest shots and you don't have like far off buildings and skyscrapers and all that kind of stuff to make or CG or whatever. So I feel like you could spend the rest of it on making the monsters look super real, super convincing.
Yeah, and I think that'd be the smarter thing to do because I'd love to see these types of things in camera. And then
Yeah.
I mean, even when we go back to that point in the cave where Zach finds, I guess, a mother Yeti and her child, cowering, and then he leaves them alone because he's not there to kill them. He just needs to find a way out. That gives it's easier to do something more human with a human thing with a human actor inside of a costume than essentially a digital puppet, which
Right.
works better for non-human things, in my opinion. Like you get maybe a dog, a dragon, a bat, a moose, a bear. Safer to kind of go those ways than putting a guy in a
Yeah.
suit, and you can do a little bit more with that there. So yeah, like this has that flexibility for it. And then now we're kind of getting close to like the spoiler area because we just came across the lake that we saw in the opening with that Dr. Nelson guy, and they get away from the Loch Ness monster by the skin of their teeth. The monster doesn't come onto shore or anything of that nature. They're in this forested area, so that means the Manananggal aren't gonna fly at them because they can't navigate through dense trees. And so as they're kind of making it through there, and I think they missed a interesting beat where Zach had just seen his musical influence in Hero die before him, so he doesn't really process that. And that could have been a good moment for Remy to kind of, show dad skills and getting him back on board or his head back in the game. It's like, listen, you know, this was bound to happen. This is why I had these reservations. You even had these reservations. If you want to make it through here, you got to listen to me. That type of speech, like we need those types of moments. Didn't happen here. I think that was a missed opportunity for the writer. But then we get deeper into the forest and we find out that, there's Dr. Nelson's body, fairly well preserved, but he's got this big cavity where his stomach used to be. And there's definitely some creatures sort of hiding in the trees. And we find his notepad that he'd been sketching notes on. And basically, it's a series of notes talking about how this is an unstable environment. These creatures are too intelligent. It's very, very dangerous. But there's a last note that he scribbles on. And we're not going to tell you what it says because it's a good twist. But that's kind of like the cutoff here because the last third of the film integrates that twist, and it still pursues basically Zach and Remy on if they can actually make it out of this ranch alive. So yeah, we're going to end that part of the plot details here. Raul, how did you find overall the script? How did you find that was? Like, how did you find the father and son discussions and that dynamic going from start to finish with American Monsters?
Yeah, the premise of the monsters and all that kind of stuff attracted me to the script initially. The fact that it started off with the relationship between father and son at the beginning of the script pulled me into the story. It was sort of a human story, which is nice because a lot of times if you're writing something like a monster movie, you can leave out the human part of it and then it all becomes about the action and whatever, which this script sort of fell into towards the end of it, especially like second act, middle of second act onwards. So as far as the dynamic is concerned, I would have liked to see more character beats with the son and the father, like you said. I think changing up, like we talked about, some of the stuff between Remy's position at the beginning and sort of how what he discovers through all of this and changing his mind and all that could be more impactful to the story and could also affect the father-son relationship even more. But I think you have the basis for it. I just think that a couple of different tweaks to the script could make it a lot better. Because obviously I'm not going to spoil anything, but obviously at the end of the script, you want the story to resolve between father and son, because that's really the focus of all of this. The arena and the environment in which it's happening is sort of secondary. It's really about the relationship between this father and son. But it would feel more satisfying if it resolved with a couple of those little tweaks and changes. Because that way and I'd like to see, especially with the second act, some more character moments instead of just jumping from action to action to action to action. Because once you hit the they slow down and sort of have a little bit of that character moment with the Yetis in the cave, right? And then after that, it's the nighttime. They're at the cabin, and then after they all fall asleep, that's when stuff starts going awry, and that's sort of middle of the script-ish towards like coming up towards the end of the second act. And from there on, it's basically just action pretty much all the way through. They don't really stop and slow down any. So I think introducing some more character moments and like you said, even the couple of bits that you pointed out, even towards the end where Ko dies and they can sort of have a moment, it would be nice to see those added into the script. Because it would make it more compelling as they go through and sort of into the last act.
Yeah, I agree. Before the show, I was talking about how you had Sam Neill's character in Jurassic Park, and he's kind of learning and appreciating the kids that he's now responsible for now that they've been lost in the jungle aspect of it. And I think, taking a few more pages from that relationship and making them work between Remy and Zach in the second half of the second act and towards the end, I think would translate a lot better, because right now this script itself has a great premise. I really like the integration of the mythical creatures, because we don't really see them as often in movies of this type. But I think at the core of this story needs to be a lot more predicated on Remy rebuilding his relationship with his son and doing so in a form of survival. from these crazy
Yeah.
creatures, as opposed to that kind of feels like it's more of an afterthought, and the forefront is just surviving itself, and the things after that
Right.
are just kind of in there. There's a couple of moments. No, there's only really one moment where Zach does something that Remy finds impressive, and I felt like I would like a couple more of those instances, but not just Zach impressing Remy, but Remy impressing Zach, type of like a back and forth type of thing. Because I think because we need that connection more so. Like they're really leaning in heavily on the audience filling in the gap of, oh yeah, it's a father and son. Of course they love each other, but they're just going through a rough patch, and this is how they get over that. I think it needs to be explored a little deeper because it needs to be a story about these characters more so than a story about these monsters they're facing.
Yeah.
Um, the only other criticism I have is I don't think American Monsters is the best title for this movie. It seems uh, it seems a little out of it. I think something integrating cryptid in it might be better. Something another two words more or less would be like cryptid ranch or cryptid hunt or something, um, because or some sort of play on a father and son dynamic, like a sin of the father or what have you, just to kind of convey that there's something more here. Because with American Monsters, when the first 10 pages you think, oh, is the American Monster like, are they talking about politicians being an American monster because of the dirty tactics that or unethical tactics or questionable tactics that they have to do in order to get legislation passed or what have you? And that doesn't really come into play so much aside from Len's need for Lane's need for that bill to be passed, and it's just kind of like that one note thing. Um,
Yeah, I feel like I thought that's where they were going with the title. Like I thought it was because of the politics side of things. But then I don't know. I thought the same thing too. It kind of like when I didn't even look at the title until I was almost done the script. I kept reading that further down, and then I was like, oh, what's this called? And then I read the title, and it was American Monsters. I just sort of falls flat. Like
yeah,
I think he was trying to do something with the Senate and the politics, and that's why it's American. And then the monsters obviously is the play on the politicians, but then also the monsters in the thing. It just doesn't, but it doesn't really strike a chord with me, I guess. Um, and it's not really memorable. I don't know. American Monsters, I feel like it's something that I would forget almost instantly
feels
if I
like
was like,
it feels like a D movie type of thing.
yeah,
I mean, and the thing is, it probably would have worked more if we were reading the script and we were questioning, well, who's really the monster here? Is it Remy or is it the things that he's hunting? And that
right.
was not a question presented in this script, so that kind of makes that deflating as well. And then the other part too is, well, were they trying to convey someone like Lane, who's this, big game hunter, huge, capitalist, industrialist type of stuff? Is he supposed to be a monster? Well, they don't really go in depth of that enough. They don't really entertain that idea. So again, yeah, the title kind of falls a little by the wayside here. I think there's definitely something. It's definitely something else that they could grab onto here. I thought it was kind of funny that Zach's band's name is called Chemtrail. uh,
Yeah.
that, that I mean, there's really not much going on with that. Like we don't even know the type of punk rock he's doing or any of that. We don't get any songs examples, so it's really kind of at arm's length here. But yeah, I mean, with that being said, Raul, like, is this a script that you would greenlight or pass, given our conversation so far?
It's a green light for me. I think the premise is interesting. I like the concept of it, the folklore, the mythology, all of that kind of stuff. The monsters are very interesting, and like you said, something you don't see very often in these types of scripts. When it's a monster, it generally tends to focus on maybe just like one kind of monster or something like that, or just a monster, like one singular one that's like hunting you, like in like typical horror movies or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so this is really interesting. They've got a really good base for the characters. I think there's some things that they could change that would make it more interesting and would also elevate the conflict between them a little bit better. Um, but all the characters have a pretty solid voice. They are interesting characters in and of themselves. I just think that they could make it more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And the little bits that we talked about was mainly just tweaking some, maybe leaving out a little bit of the action or condensing it, and then focusing more on sort of the character moments, which I think is something you could easily accomplish
Yeah.
with a couple of rewrites or whatever. So the drawbacks for me aren't enough to say don't make this. I want to see it. I would like to see this, so that's why it's a green light for me.
I'm in a very similar boat. Aside from my criticisms of like Remy's point of view politically and his character arc, that's an easy fix because it's really just a first act stuff. I like, again, I like the idea of mythical creatures in a ranch setting in a park, used for one thing, but then kind of revolting against that choice. I also really like the characters are very distinct. They have their own points of views. Every character that we are introduced to, that's a speaking role, clearly has their own directive and goals. A lot of them align with the other characters, and some have conflicts with the other characters, which I appreciated. The twist I enjoyed. I thought that was pretty cool. It's a basic twist, but it serves the plot really well, and it serves the characters really well. And I like I also like some of the inventive ways that Remy is able to navigate through this ranch in order to get to safety, or at least try to get to safety with his son and the plans that they have there. Even though there's a couple of convoluted aspects to it, the rules worked. Like, there was no breaking of the script's own rules, which is actually really important when you're dealing with a script like this. Is sometimes you can find so many ways to sort of cheat or get around a rule you put in place. I have to give props to the writer Chris Grillot that he made his rules and he stuck with them all the way through, and they work. And yeah, so I'm giving this a green light as well, because there's so much that is done right that the minor things that he didn't get are not fixes that would completely change the script overall. It's not like, oh, I fixed this one thing and then all of a sudden I got to rewrite the rest of the script. It's more like I fixed this one thing and now there's a deeper meaning as a result of what has already been written on the page because of this change. And I think that goes a long way, because we've read other scripts where it's just off the rails with the amount of issues that they have here. And this one, it's like, yeah, you've got that one moment that's kind of off the rails, but everything else around it is so solid that the tweak doesn't require any changing later on in that second half of the script, because it's all, the second half of the script is the end point. You just have to change the beginning point so that that end point has a lot of a deeper meaning. And so, yeah, that's a green light for me as well, which gives us another double green light script in a row, which is always great. Now we're going to quickly check in on the Patreon side of things and see what you guys who are members of the Patreon had to say about this script, or how you guys voted. And you guys were in a different boat than Raoul and myself. We have 100% of the people voted said they were going to pass on American Monsters. Now, sadly, the people that voted did not comment on the reasons why they chose to pass. That's okay. I would appreciate if you did, because that's something that can further the discussion, because maybe you guys saw something we didn't, and I'd love to do that, because that's part of the learning process and the fun of this show. So if you guys out there...
And I will fight every single one of you guys on it, so let us know what the comments were, because this was a good script.
and you know what? That makes some also some good entertainment as well. Good healthy debate on stuff like that. So yes, that's what you guys said. So again, if you're part of the Patreon, you're listening to this, please, when you do vote for a script, leave a comment. If you don't want your name read on the show, just say don't read my name, and here's the comment. We'll be happy to maintain that anonymity. I definitely respect anonymity, especially if you're being still respectful while you're also anonymous. That's also a big point in my book here. But checking in on the chat side of things, we have the Dead Man, who super stickered 2 poop emojis twice. Thank you for that, sir. I guess for last week's show and then this week's show. So that's muchly appreciated. Not required, but much appreciated. Yeah. So any final thoughts, Raul, before we call it a night? Because this was a good script to talk about. I highly encourage people to go check it out. It's available on the Google searches there, but if you're having trouble, of course, please just send me a message on Twitter X, or join the Patreon and send me a message there. Raul, any final thoughts want to cover before we call it a night?
Yeah, the only thing I was gonna say was it was sort of different than other scripts I've read. Like I said, a lot of horror tends to focus on maybe one thing or one type of monster or whatever, or like a monster, not necessarily even something from mythology or whatever.
Hmm.
So I really like that. And then the one thing I was gonna mention, which you were talking about a little bit at the end there, was not just the rules were consistent, but I also found that for a script of this type that dealt with like mythological creatures and stuff, none of the action was like unbelievable. Like
Right.
the stuff that they were doing didn't seem so far-fetched or so like convenience just to let the characters escape or whatever. It all felt like this is realistic. This is something that could happen. I mean, all the creatures were like susceptible to gunfire, the like or explosions or whatever. So it was it dealt with everything in a very like consistent, logical, but believable sort of way. So I liked it. I think it was a good script overall.
I do too. I really do hope this kind of goes the distance and someone invests in it and we get to see it. Ideally, not on streaming. I think for theater goers, this would be a fun script to get people screaming in the seats and doing so not with jump scares, because there's not a single jump scare in this script.
Yeah,
It's all done really cleverly. Like you think that they'd go for that low hanging fruit, but no, he did not. He said nope. We're gonna do it this way, and we're gonna make it work. And yeah, the script does make that work, and you feel good. So, yeah, that's it for tonight, guys. Thank you so much for joining us, Raul. Please share with our listeners where they can find you on the interwebs here.
yeah. I'm at Raul Enu on everything. Links and stuff probably down in the description.
Hmm.
Got YouTube, X, Instagram, whatever. Follow me on all of them.
Absolutely, and I want to thank everyone out there listening live, also listening on the replay. It's always very, very much appreciated. We have another super chat donation for $1.99 from the Dead Man. Says, I require myself to send poop emojis. Well, that's a good requirement, and I appreciate that, Dead Man. I appreciate your support. I appreciate the support of everyone out there. Listening live here on YouTube or listening over on the Patreon show. It is greatly appreciated. We're going to keep this going for a while because there's still plenty of scripts to discuss in the future, which means that every show is going to have a new story to tell, and that's one of the reasons why I love doing it and sharing it with all of you guys out there. I want to wish you all a wonderful weekend, and until next time, remember, guys, when it comes to great story, it all starts with the script.